Hey, everybody, and happy Monday, and welcome back for another Lunch Break Live with me, Ivana. And today we've got a really interesting talk with our own columnist, Joe Goodman. Now, Joe, if you've kept up with news over the weekend, if you didn't, maybe you're waking up to this news today, but at Talladega yesterday on Sunday, actually yesterday evening, NASCAR announced that there had been a noose found in driver Bubba Wallace's garage area. And Joe Goodman wrote about that for us, wrote a column for us, and he's here today to talk a little bit about it. So that all happened yesterday evening. I think you said, Joe, that statement from NASCAR came out pretty late. So a lot of people might not be familiar with NASCAR and with Bubba, but also with the incident. So can you just first tell us a little bit about what happened and what NASCAR said happened?
So the Geico 500 was canceled yesterday due to rain. So most everyone was gone from the infield and the garage area at Talladega Super Speedway around 5:30, and this must have happened after that because NASCAR's statement didn't come out until 11 o'clock, and they said it happened in quote late afternoon. Uh, and it's important for people to understand that with the protocols for COVID-19 going on, uh, the infield, the garage area, no one was allowed down there except for NASCAR and track personnel all day. Normally fans are allowed in the pit area. That's part of the big allure of NASCAR to fans, how they can be right there on pit road and in the garage area before the race, meeting drivers, getting autographs. It's a very, accessible sport in that way. And the media center in Talladega Super Speedway is right down there in the infield. All of that was closed off for anyone who's familiar with Talladega Super Speedway. So for this to happen, I mean, it's unbelievable and unconscionable that something like this could happen, especially uh, right now in the environment that we're in this country. And as Bubba Wallace has taken a stand against racism and police brutality and has been a voice, an enormous voice for the Black Lives Matter movement as a professional athlete, this was a clear hate crime. There's no other way around it.
Right. Well, and so can you, for those of us, like I've never been to Talladega to the race, and can you explain like where the garage area is in relation to the track and to the stands? I know you said people were already out of the stadium at that point, but how close or how far away is it?
Yeah, sure. So, there's the enormous tri-oval track at Talladega, and
Mhm.
the infield is inside the track. Okay. Um, Outside of everything is the grandstand. Uh, all the RVs, they drive under a tunnel into the infield. All the big trucks that carry the cars, everything, all the TV camera crew, everything, fans, they're they're in the infield. Okay, but all that was closed off. Essential personnel this weekend because of the COVID-19 protocol at Talladega. And that's what kind of makes this just even more sensible is that it must have been. Everyone's assuming that it must have just been like someone related to NASCAR and event staff, uh, with the track. No one really knows at this point, but like I said in the column, they don't even need to run the race today until we find out what happened.
Now, and they are planning on running that race today at 2 o'clock. Is that correct?
That's correct. 2 o'clock.
We've got a lot of people asking. I'm just putting one on the screen, but we got a lot of people asking about video footage because Talladega is obviously a very big area. It's a very popular area, and this race is extremely popular. So, do we know anything about cameras? Have there been any confirmation reports of footage from that area, or of seeing somebody actually hang that noose? Or what are NASCAR saying about this?
I mean, we don't even know if it was hung per se. Um, they just all they said in their statement was that it was in the garage stall area. There are cameras down there, and I'm sure that they're investigating the footage of any cameras. But as far as I know, anything that would come out right now would be all speculation and rumor. because I haven't heard anything official, and nor would they announce anything while this is under investigation.
Right. So everybody I know look at comments asking if we've reviewed the tapes. We have not reviewed any tapes. We have not even gotten any confirmation that there is tapes or anything like that. So just to answer some of those questions, let me look and see. We tried to get, you can see on the bottom, I have that we were going to talk to our own Roy S. Johnson about this. I know he had some feelings that he wanted to share, and he's written about NASCAR in the past. Let me see if I can bring him in. We were having some audio issues earlier. Roy, have we got you?
You have me. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can hear you, Roy. Great.
Right.
We got you. We were trying to get his audio working, so we figured we wing it. But so glad we have you, Roy. Now, I know that you had a lot of thoughts about this, and I know you've written about NASCAR and about racing in the past as well, and about its history in race relations.
Yeah, how far back do you want to go? Back in 1999, I was an editor-at-large at Fortune magazine and wrote what was a cover story, which was pretty unusual for them, on the state of NASCAR. NASCAR was trying to pull out of decades of being a deep South sport, Southern sport, and was just beginning to hit the mainstream. Jeff Gordon was their star driver at the time. He was extremely popular. I got to spend a day with him as he was making marketing trips all over the country. And NASCAR seemed to be poised to become, or at least start to get some popularity among mainstream fans. There have always been African-American race fans. It's stock car racing. It's fast cars. Everybody likes fast cars. And in the South, where African-Americans represent a significant part of the population, there were always black fans, but the sport never embraced them. The sport and its roots, by allowing that Confederate flag to pretty much be flown and sold indiscriminately inside the tracks, on the infield with people with their RVs. It really was not a friendly place for fans who did not believe in that symbol. The time I went to Daytona, probably saw several dozen flags. I mean, NASCAR was welcoming, the drivers were welcoming, people in the pits were welcoming. But to see that flag just seemed to send a signal to me and other black fans that we were not welcome. But NASCAR for 20 years did not have the temerity, did not have the guts to make a change and to just ultimately ban that flag. And they did finally, as you mentioned, 2 weeks ago. So in doing that, obviously they angered some people. This was very predictable. It was predictable that people would go to extremes to try to display the flag. We heard, you may have talked about it earlier, there were trucks driving around outside with the Confederate flag, and a vendor outside the front gate probably selling out of Confederate flags, and someone renting a plane and flying over. To see a noose, I have to say it was a little surprising, but surprising, not surprising, because it is now one of those symbols of fear. It is the new Klan version of the burning cross.
Right.
Something that cowards use in order to try to intimidate and invoke fear. And I use the word cowards very purposely because they sneak into the dark of night. They think they're hidden. Obviously, they're not very smart because there's probably video footage of someone not hanging, but putting that noose at the garage. So, I think they probably already know who it is, Joe, and they'll probably reveal that later. And as you mentioned, it might more than likely be an inside job. But Joe and I are good friends, but on this we disagree. I hope they do run the race, because this is exactly what people like this want. They want you to stop doing what you're doing. They want you to stop in your tracks and pay attention to them. The fact that we're talking about this is more than enough. I do think NASCAR, they came out with a strong statement, but Bubba Wallace came out with even a stronger statement. He said his mother told him never to be afraid. So he's ready to race. NASCAR should be ready to race. NASCAR should not be intimidated by cowards who are using old symbols of race baiting and race intimidation to try to make a point. I hope they run the race. I hope the weather holds out and it goes on as usual.
Something that I thought was interesting, and I'm glad you said it, is just to talk about Bubba really quick. For those of you who don't know, he is an Alabama native. And I read the statement that Bubba put on his social media accounts, and he did mention that his mother said, look, this was done to frighten you, and this was done to make you afraid. Joe, have we heard anything else from Bubba?
No, he put out his statement on Twitter. I'm sure that today he might even have a press conference before the race. More than likely, He'll just run the race and focus on the race. And that's another thing. This was a clear threat to his safety and, and an act of aggression in a sport where they're driving cars at 200 miles an hour. I mean, those things are deadly weapons just in and of themselves, driving around the track. And that's an element that is just inherent in the sport. So to add this threat on top of that, it's kind of frightening, and that kind of speaks to the idea of they need to get to the bottom of this before they run this race. I'm concerned about Bubba Wallace's safety, like legitimately concerned, and I'm sure that there are authorities who are expressing these same concerns behind the scenes. Um, it's one thing to to kind of speak to the face of cowards that put this in there, but it's another thing to take a stand and say we're not going to run this sport anymore until we get to the bottom of this and just smoke these people out.
I think it's interesting that both of y'all have different opinions on that, on running the race or not running the race. What do either of you think if say we run the race today at 2:00, the weather holds out, say they decide to do it, and Bubba wins, or if he comes in that top 3, what does that say if they do run the race? What does that say about NASCAR that they do want to run the race, or they decide not to? Does their decision here make a statement in itself?
Well, I'm sure the decision will be made in accordance with Bubba Wallace and probably others. He'll be involved in that. As we know, so far they are going to run that race. I think it just speaks to, and I think what both Joe and I are talking about is that, do you allow this outside element to affect your enterprise to the degree that it shuts it down? There's no, we totally agree that they need to get to the bottom of this and find out who exactly left that noose or hung that noose or whatever they did with the noose at the garage, and they should be thrown out of NASCAR lifetime if, in fact, it turns out to be somebody associated and affiliated with NASCAR. So we all await that, and I'm also certain that even before this, that the level of security around not just the race, but Bubba Wallace himself is probably higher than it's ever been and will be for the rest of the season. But that, again, is no different. I mean, Joe, my ancestors and many of us have often walked around not knowing what's going to happen. We've all been in situations where we've been threatened. We've been intimidated. Joe, I get threatening emails still at AL.com. And as you know, journalists have been under attack across the country. And so, I mean, it is something that we kind of learn to live with, being very aware of it. Whenever I get those threats, we pass them on to the authorities. But I don't stop writing. I don't stop living my life. I don't stop going out. There are certain things in life you can control and some you can't control. And, you just pray for a hedge of protection around you and that you continue to have safety. But and I think that Bubba Wallace is, as his mother said, he's not afraid. He's going to go live his life. He's going to do what he has been gifted to do. And I'm sure NASCAR will take every precaution to try to assure his safety, notwithstanding the fact that he's driving around the track at 200 plus miles an hour, as you said.
Sage advice and great perspective. There's another thing that needs to be said. A couple of things. Bubba Wallace is a really popular figure in NASCAR. Fans like him. It's not like he is unliked, not popular, not good at what he does. He's a great driver. He might I think he starts. I don't know where he's starting right now in this race. I think they're doing it by lottery system to start, but he may very well be up near the front at the end of this race. And as everyone who follows Talladega knows that it's 500 miles of trying to position yourself on the last couple laps in the front. And he has the talent to do that. And people also need to realize, though, the history of this Confederate flag and NASCAR. NASCAR wrapped themselves in the Confederate flag for decades, okay? And this is part of that blowback. This is the reckoning for NASCAR right now. They can't just they need to some way acknowledge their past, okay, and then at the same time look towards the future. But there are people who grew up loving NASCAR who, and I don't agree with them, but they feel disenfranchised right now because NASCAR is distancing themselves from this symbol that they built their brand on. NASCAR cannot be let off the hook completely on this, okay? In the 90s, at Talladega Superspeedway, the entire seats in the grandstand had the image of stars and bars like a flowing sea, okay? Blue bar flowing through red seats. Um, at Martinsville, they used to give the winners Confederate flags for the race, which they called the Civil War. At Darlington, you know, the Confederate flag was so synonymous with that race. Strom Thurmond would attend every single race, and that was like the heart of segregationist Dixiecrats, in the South. At the Atlanta Motor Speedway, the first trophy ring that they gave champions of the race featured a Confederate flag on it. So NASCAR built its brand on this, and this is kind of the long legacy of hate that is showing itself now that they're trying to distance themselves from the flag, which they have to do, which the sport is going to have to do if it wants to survive. But it's something they need to acknowledge.
Do you think, Joe, that this noose symbol, this placing of the noose is in, do you think that would have happened if the NASCAR wasn't trying to distance themselves from the Confederate flag, or do you think those two things are related?
No, yes, it's absolutely related. Bubba Wallace is a black man who has been outspoken about racism and police brutality, and this is why that happened. Okay, we cannot afford. We're not going to say maybe this is why that happened. No, this is exactly why that happened. This is why it's a hate crime. This is why it's domestic terrorism.
And I've seen a lot of people asking about if. Oh, go ahead, Roy. You go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's no question this is NASCAR proverbial chickens coming home to roost. As Joe said, after decades of wrapping themselves in Southern culture, wrapping themselves in the symbolism of hatred with the Confederate flag and other symbols that were utilized to promote that evil history in our past, NASCAR, finally 2 weeks ago said at least enough of that symbol, and people are clearly mad. As you mentioned, they've angered a core segment of their audience. That was built and the sport for it came out of companies and out of their far places that they live. So absolutely, NASCAR is paying for its past, and it should pay for its past. That's why this is such a seminal moment for them. Not only do they have to find who did this, but they have to evoke the most severe punishment possible to, if nothing else, make the statement that beyond the statement. They've said that it's not going to be tolerated. They have talked about moving away from the past. Well, it's time to stop talk and walk the walk, or drive, as it were, in NASCAR, and really serious. It happened for a reason. It happened for NASCAR to early on show if it really means business, not only about repudiating its racist past, but just trying to at least balance itself and show that it is no longer going to be tolerated. Because if they don't do it here, this may be their last chance to really prove to a wide audience that they are an open sport, that they do want everyone in the stands, they do want everyone watching. And it's interesting, Bubba Wallace has really become the face of the sport. May not be, like a Jeff Gordon, Earnhardt Jr., more historic figures, but right now he is.
Right, and something to I think
speaking up.
I think we were losing Roy a little bit on his audio. Is cutting in and out. So we'll bring him back in a second when we get him back. But Joe, I know we have a lot of people asking, when do we expect NASCAR to make a statement showing more what they're looking at, talking about video? Do we know if NASCAR is planning to hold a press conference or anything like that today?
I'll be asking them questions during a press conference. Yeah, they're going to have to address it in one way or another. I don't know if it's going to happen before the race. I don't know if it's going to happen via Twitter statement again, national TV, on Fox. Whether we're going to have a live press conference or before the race, we'll have to see. I'm about to make the 50-minute drive from my house to Talladega right now after we hang up here.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you really quick, getting a lot of questions here on this too, and I'm not, like I said, I've never been to the race. I need to go, but who all has access to that garage other than the crew for Bubba Wallace himself, and who else? Do the crew members of all the drivers have access, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's an open garage run, okay, that stretches for several hundred meters. And normally on a race weekend, it's open to fans. And if you got a pass to go into the garage area, you can go in the garage area. You can watch them working on the cars before the race. You can try to get autographs from drivers. You can take pictures. I mean, there are a lot of inherent things about NASCAR that are really fun. And one of them is the fact that as a fan, you can go down to the garage area and you can be with the guys while they're working on the cars before the race. You can go on pit road. It's loud. It's sensory overload. Right now, during COVID protocol, all of that is closed off to fans, and the only people that have access to the garage area are NASCAR staff, event staff, people like this. So that is why there's an assumption right now, whether it's correct or not, that it was someone who was there in an official capacity with Talladega Superspeedway or NASCAR.
And I understand, after you explaining that a little bit more, I do understand your comments about safety. And I know that this is not the case this weekend because of COVID, but typically if fans have such close access to the cars, I understand that point there, and how that could be dangerous. But as far as we know, Bubba's car was not tampered with, correct?
No, not as far as, I mean, that's wild speculation. No, I don't think there's any evidence to suggest anything like that.
Got it. Well, I think we got Roy back, but I just wanted to bring you back on here, Roy, for a second to tell y'all thank you. And I appreciate y'all's conversation about this. I know Joe's got to get on the road to head back up to Talladega to keep us updated on all that. So I'm sorry we had to cut you off, Roy. Any closing thoughts?
No, I'm like everybody else. I'm curious to see what transpires. I'm curious to see what NASCAR says. I'm particularly curious to, as you were mentioning about damage to the car. I'm sure they checked that car 15 times before it goes off today at 2:00. But this is a story that won't go away, and one that I think could be.
Great. Well, thank y'all both so much. I appreciate it. Joe, be safe on the road. Be safe in Talladega. Give us all the updates. And thank you both so much. And thank all of you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks. Bye.